Hello chess friends and welcome to your Tata Chess channel and welcome to a beautiful tournament that's going on now these days. Welcome to the Tata Steel Masters in 2022. So this is now again a classical time format tournament in which we have 14 players battling it out for the throne in 13 round one round robin in which Magnus Carlsen is performing. We have also the top grandmaster Fabiano Caruana, also another former world championship challenger Sergei Karyakin is also playing. Jan-Krzysztof is playing Daniil Dubov, so it will be, I think, a brilliant tournament. Alireza Firouzja is unfortunately not playing. He had some issues with the organizers. We'll come to that point in the later stage of our tournament. But we're starting now with the round 2. I couldn't cover yesterday games because I was positive on the damn virus. I had this COVID, and then I had to rest a little bit. Didn't really feel to analyze any game. So now we're starting with the game from the round 2 between Magnus Carlsen and Anish Giri. So this was brilliant game by both players from the round 2. Be prepared. This is again really beautiful stuff, because in classical time format chess we have seen always the best of Magnus Carlsen. Magnus Carlsen is basically unbeatable in classical time format chess, and his primary goal that he also mentioned in one of his interviews is to finally reach maybe his 2900 rating points in classical time format chess, which is, in my opinion, when it comes to Magnus Carlsen, a manageable thing, and I think he can manage to do that in the near future. Maybe not in this tournament, of course, but if Magnus gets a goal, if he knows his clear goal, then Magnus Carlsen can make that happen for sure. So let's check out now what happened. Magnus Carlsen here with the white pieces and Anish Giri with the black pieces. Both players from the round 1 managed to get a draw, so both players after the round 1 had a half of a point. So here Magnus opened with the move d4. Anish responsible was knight to f6, c4. We have e6, and after move knight to f3 we have the anti-Nimzo Indian system. Again, we don't want to play knight to c3, then bishop to b4 could happen, and then you get pinned, and then you risk in some occasions to have this double pawn structure. So we have now the move d5, which transposes now into the queen's gambit decline, and now Magnus plays the Catalan system, and I have to be harsh a little bit. Magnus is not so successful with the Catalan. He's trying it out very often, but his success rate is not so good, I think, in the Catalan. Although the Catalan is beautiful and you have really sharp attacking opportunities for white. I used to play the Catalan myself, then stopped to play it, but in my opinion, Magnus most of the times plays the normal classical systems, knight to c3, but again, he tried out now the Catalan. He wanted to play a really wild, dynamic and open game. So bishop to e7. Here we have bishop to g2. We have castling by Anish Giri, and now Magnus also castled kingside. So we have now d takes c4, and this is the main line of the Catalan opening, because what we're trying to do here from black's perspective is to finally build sort of a wall. c6, b5, a6, maybe include then the bishop into the defense, and also maybe to block the long diagonal here with the potential knight to d5 move. If that happens, then of course white cannot use immediately this attacks on the light square diagonal. The main goal here of white is of course to liberate this long diagonal for the light square bishop, then to play knight to e5, recapture the pawn somehow on c4, or maybe with another with queen to c2, or maybe with knight to a3. So we're trying basically for white's perspective to recapture the pawn somehow, and then if that happens, then of course we would have two connected pawns in the center of the board, which is of course this pawn central control, which is a slightly then advantage of course for white. So Magnus chooses to play here a very aggressive method, knight to a3, which I also used to play, but then I didn't have again success with these lines, and I lost many games in this knight to a3 system. The evaluation is about equal for both sides. The engine gives here equal chances for both sides. This move knight to a3, it's really a provocative move. It's telling now black, you can take the knight on a3. If you don't do that, white is going to recapture the pawn without messing up the pawn structure further, so you cannot even cover it with b5. You see knight to b5, the knight is controlling that square, so that's why here it's already a provocative move by Magnus Carlsen. Anish Giri accepts the challenge, bishop to a3. We have b takes a3, and now bishop to d7. This is a normal move also in the Catalan system, because what we want to do here from black's perspective is finally to compete on this diagonal where this annoying bishop on g2 is standing, because as we said, knight to e5 is then a serious threat. So Magnus plays a4. He's not allowing here Anish Giri to play the move b5. If that happens, of course, then this pawn could be connected. Then with a6 c6, finally this pawn on c4 could be protected, and then if black protects the pawn, then in a potential endgame stage, this is simply a winning game for black. So white needs to make something out of this dynamic game, because black has lost the bishop pair. Black doesn't have anymore the bishop pair. White has the bishop pair. It's a really wild game, but if you don't make anything out of your bishop pair, then probably black is winning the game. So risky choice by Magnus Carlsen, but I like his choice, because we want to see, of course, the world champion playing really dynamic games. So after move a4 here, finally Anish regrouped, and he's competing now on this very important diagonal with the move bishop to c6. Bishop to a3, Magnus gets use now of this diagonal. Rook to e8 has to be played, of course, and now queen to c2, preparing finally to grab the pawn on c4. So we have now knight to d7 here by Anish Giri. I like always this line, bishop to e4. Bishop to e4 is guaranteeing you really a nice grip on light squares, and then you can play even knight to d5. Then you're not blocking out your own bishop here. I like to always here sort of a positional pin, because what we want to do is this knight to move somewhere from white's perspective, and that if that happens, then we can simply trade off the bishops and have, I think, a simplified game. So that's why I think this is a good method if you meet the Catalan, to get your bishops somewhere around the square e4, then to play still on this diagonal and wait, simply as I said, this knight to jump. But okay, here knight from b to d7 played by Anish. He develops, of course, first all of his minor pieces. We have rook from a to c1, we have a6 here by Anish, and now queen to c4. And okay, mission accomplished. Magnus Carlsen has his pawn back, but we have to also say this is not a good pawn on a4. This is a weak pawn in the long run. It can be, of course, attacked by black's pieces, but also what we can notice, Magnus has opened many files, has opened also many diagonals, which is a perfect position for the bishop pair. When you play with the bishops, you want to have this kind of position. You don't want to have closed symmetrical positions. You want to have really asymmetrical pawn structures. You want to have opportunities to attack the diagonals files, as I said. So this is a beautiful position for a dynamic player. So after move queen to c4, we have knight to b6 by Anish. We have queen to c3. Here we have knight to a4. Magnus Carlsen is giving up simply his pawn, but in order just to bring the queen here again on b3, and there is now beautiful tactical shot, of course. A rook takes c6, and then if b takes c6 happens, then queen to a4 would grab the knight. So that's why Anish played queen to d5, includes now a new defender into the game, because after potential rook to c6, then you have still the opportunity to play queen to c6 and the knight would be protected. But you can guess what Magnus Carlsen does. Magnus Carlsen plays here and rook takes c6 anyway. So instead of this maybe queen to d5 move, I think knight to b6 is perfectly fine here. I think Anish Giri should have played this move, because you're first of all protecting your knight. The knight is not so stuck to the defense of the bishop on c6. So here the bishop on c6 is a little bit overloaded, I think. So that's why maybe retreating with the knight on b6 and then maybe to search for new squares, knight to d5, maybe bishop to d5, knight to c4 as a long-term plan could work. Maybe not immediately, but sort of an idea how to regroup here. So knight to b6, in my opinion, maybe slightly better move here for Anish, but he played queen to d5, and you see the queen is also getting in the range of the bishop. So here Magnus Carlsen accepts the challenge immediately and sacrifices the rook for the exchange. He plays rook takes c6, beautiful tactical shot. It's not a mistake. It's not one of the tactical shots where you just want to scare your opponent and you play maybe sort of tactics and then you hope for the best. No, this is a well calculated tactic that Magnus Carlsen pull off. Rook to c6, we have queen to c6, and of course now this beautiful stunner knight to e5. So what Magnus is trying to do is, of course, he wants to simply grab two pieces for the rook. If that happens, then black is losing this game for sure. So that's why knight to e5, deflecting the queen somehow from the defense of the knight, but still queen to b5 is your possibility. But that was the beauty of Magnus Carlsen's calculation. He played now queen to c2, and you see now this queen to c2 is such an annoying move, because what we can notice, first of all, this pawn is hanging. Also, what can happen in the near future, this one, the rook to b1 can happen. Also, bishop to e4 can happen, and bishop to b7 are opportunities. So what can also happen, I think, in the near future, maybe it's also somehow maybe to deflect somehow this knight from the defense of the square h7, and then with the queen and bishop battery there are also several threats. So here again, Anish Giri had the opportunity maybe to play the move knight to b6, and after move knight to b6 probably Magnus Carlsen would have taken the pawn here, bishop to b7, then maybe something like knight to c4 could happen, maybe this one, maybe here Anish Giri could also take out the bishop, or maybe here after, instead of this knight to c4, rook to b8 is also an opportunity. But Anish Giri, instead of this move knight to b6, again this was, in my opinion, the good defensive move, because again the knight is not so loose on the board. After move bishop queen to c2 here, Anish Giri played unfortunately the move knight to d5, and now the fun really starts. There is a new huge problem now for Anish Giri here, because Magnus Carlsen took, played first rook to b1, and after queen to a5, Magnus Carlsen took now the knight on d5. The problem about the queen is that the queen is a little bit trapped here. You see now the problems of the queen. First of all, the queen is again a little bit stuck to the defense of the knight on a4. As we said, knight to b6 would solve many position problems for Anish, but after move queen to a5, here bishop to d5 played by Magnus Carlsen. If you play queen to d5, then of course you see the knight is hanging, and then it's a completely winning endgame then for Magnus. So that's why e takes d5 was played here by Anish Giri. But now rook to b7, and there is now a new threat here by Magnus Carlsen. The move bishop to b4 is a threat, because if you can notice, bishop to b4 is actually trapping the queen. The queen does have somewhere to escape, so the only way maybe to protect the queen is to move c5 to liberate somehow here. That was also the move that Anish Giri played, but there are too many threats here. I think queen to f5 is also a threat here, then the pawn on f7 could be hanging, so too many threats simply here for Anish Giri. So that's why he tried at least here to liberate somehow the position for the queen. He's trying to get some escape routes, because if you try, let's see, rook to b8, then bishop to b4 happens, and look at this wild position. The queen is simply trapped. Really wild stuff where the queen went. So that was all because of this dubious move here by Anish Giri, because of the move knight to d5. As we said, knight to b6, knight to b6, knight to, he had to play that move several times, didn't play that, and unfortunately got punished. Now as we said, knight to d5 was played, and now bishop to d5, rook to b7, and now c5, and now Magnus plays now this move, of course, queen to f5, threatens now checkmate on f7 and also on g7 here. So rook to f8, we have knight to knight takes f7. There was simply too much pressure around the square f7. We have queen to d8, maybe queen to e1 was sort of move, but it doesn't help you anyway, because here Anish Giri hoped for this scenario, knight takes d8, then of course here rook takes f5, and then maybe this is playable then for black. But okay, after move queen to d8, probably the best move here for Magnus Carlsen would have been here this line, knight to h6, and then after here if you take g takes h6, then queen to h7 is checkmate. So maybe this was also a beautiful opportunity, but after move knight to h6, okay, black doesn't have to take, but in my opinion it's worth a shot to this move knight to h6. Still you can always retreat then again to f7. But okay, here after move queen to d8, Magnus Carlsen played also a good move, I think, d takes c5, now with the opportunity to play simply the move c6, and then if that happens, you see the rook is also here attacked. So that's why Anish Giri tried to simplify the game. Queen to f6, he tried now to trade off the queens. At least the position is not so dangerous, but still this pass pawn is a really wild one. With the support of these two minor pieces, again white is much better. So here after move queen to f6, we have queen takes f6, g takes f6, and now here knight to h6 played by Magnus Carlsen, king to h8, and now you see this pawn is marching here, rook from f to c8, and now even c7 Magnus Carlsen played. And there is now of course an immediate threat, knight to f5 and knight to d6 or knight to e7 will simply pick up the rook, and again it's completely winning endgame then for Magnus Carlsen. In the continuation of the game here, Anish Giri tried to play knight to c3. Maybe his goal was somehow to include this knight into the game, knight takes e2, and then maybe if this pawn is marching, then also it could be a dangerous then position for Magnus Carlsen. But still, if for instance Magnus plays now this endgame perfectly, this is completely winning for white. So after knight to c3, Magnus Carlsen played now again a beautiful move, bishop to b2, getting of course use of this long diagonal. Now the king is really trapped here in the continuation, d4 played by Anish, but now comes this idea, knight to f7, knight to g7, now this knight to d6, we have king to g6, king to f1, here we have knight to b5, knight takes c8, rook takes c8, and now a4. This is again a beautiful move, because here after knight to c7, bishop to d4, this position is simply now again too much to handle. I think because of this 4 versus 2 situation, Magnus Carlsen realized that going into a favorable endgame is also perfectly fine. Here after move knight to e6, we have bishop to e3, and in this position Anish Giri resigned, which was I think a fair decision. Magnus Carlsen really outplayed here Anish. Now rook to b6 are opportunities getting use of this bishop, as I said, f3, then maybe e4, 4 versus 2 with probably as we said win simply the game for Magnus Carlsen. So okay, great game by the world champion. I really enjoyed it because the Catalan is really wild, especially with this knight to a3 line, which we have to study I think more and more. You see how tricky this position can be. Anish Giri had his opportunities, queen to d5 first, then knight to d5 he played. He could have played several times the move knight to b6 and defend himself, settle down a little bit, slow down the pace of the game, which was I think a normal idea. Unfortunately for him, he got punished because of his inaccuracies. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more games from some other tournaments, check out my commented chess games. Here's the link. And if you want to see the best chess games played by engine, check out my best chess games of all times played by computers. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.